And we are live. At least we should be. If you have trouble hearing me, please type it in the chat. If you have trouble seeing us, please also type it in the chat. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depends on where you are. Welcome to this webinar powered by WorkFlex and the GMA, the Global Mobility Alliance. Thank you very much for the responses. That's amazing. Yes, we're going to talk today for an hour about a pretty exciting topic, at least for specialists, I guess, about posted worker notifications, and especially about the new process or the new proposal, which has been made by the EU Commission on this so-called e-declaration. We're going to talk about the what, the why, the how, and the when. But before we do this, maybe it's a good idea to introduce ourselves. I will start because I'm talking now anyway. Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Manda. I'm Dutch, so please excuse the Dutch accent. One of the co-founders of WorkFlex, and my background is in tax law. Used to work at PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for more than 13 years, both in the Netherlands and in Germany, and always in the tax consulting department for large employers that employ people internationally and their tax and legal compliance. And I brought with me today a colleague and a true specialist in the area of PWDs. Martina, may I ask you to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hello, good morning, everyone, from me as well. This is Martina Mengi. I am a senior manager for legal and employer compliance at WorkFlex that I've joined since the beginning of our adventure back in 2022 as a manager. Before, I worked for 4 years and a half at KPMG Law in Berlin, Germany, in the International Employment Law Department, dealing with the international assignments and business streets at the international level, and especially within the European Union. I am Italian. I studied law in Italy and in France, obtained a double degree, and then European Studies at the College of Europe in Bruges, and obtained a PhD concerning the topics of posted workers. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here today and discuss this challenging proposal from the EU Commission. I think we have a lot to discuss. And yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Martina. Maybe quickly introduction on WorkFlex and the Global Mobility Alliance. For those of you who don't know, WorkFlex is a company that builds the Global Mobility compliance platform. We've started with vacation compliance, added business travel compliance, commuter compliance, and very soon to come also assignment compliance in a very tech-enabled way, basically trying to help you, large employers with international populations, to remain compliant when people are working across borders. And then on the Global Mobility Alliance, it's basically an initiative that I personally started, trying to bring together global mobility specialists or international assignment specialists from many different companies, from many different countries, basically to share experiences, share challenges, to be a platform really where we can share knowledge. So that's very quickly on the WorkFlex and Global Mobility Alliance. One quick household remark. Of course, Martina and myself, we love hearing ourselves talk, but we actually do this for you. So if you have any questions or any remarks throughout this webinar, then you're highly invited to simply share your questions. You can do this either in the chat. I see many of you have already found the chat. Amazing. Thanks for the engagement. That's lovely. So just simply type your question there and we'll try to get to the question as soon as possible. We're not going to wait until the end with questions because, I repeat, we're doing this really for you. And there's also another option for putting in questions. There should be in your screen another button that doesn't just say chat, but that actually says questions. You can also use that one. I don't really mind which one you prefer. I'll try to keep an eye on both of them, although I'm only a man, so I really can't do two things at the same time, but we're going to give it a try nevertheless. So it's December, obviously, Christmas time. And that's why we also thought it would be cool to play a little game with you, or it's not necessarily a game. We always love, you may have seen my colleagues from WorkFlex already, we're super active on LinkedIn. And we would invite you to share any post about this webinar, what you learned, what was good, maybe what was not so good on LinkedIn, please post it. Don't forget to tag WorkFlex in your post, and then you'll be contacted and you'll receive a surprise Christmas gift from WorkFlex. So please do this. It would be really cool to see some engagement, not only here in the webinar itself, but also on LinkedIn. Before we dive into the current posted worker notification processes, maybe, Martina, may I ask you to quickly introduce this whole proposal? Because for some, this might still be new. Like, what is the reason at all that we're talking today?
Yeah, exactly. So less than 1 month ago, the European Commission presented a proposal to adopt a new reform of the current posted worker notification system. As you are aware, when we talk about posted workers, we are talking about several requirements. It's not only about the notification itself. You have to comply with some obligations. You have to keep some documents available. So there are plenty of administrative efforts for company and employers. But the Commission thought that now time has come to amend the notification system itself. So how actually companies report to the labor authorities of the destination country that an employee or several employees are going to work on their territory. And the Commission thought that it's time because, as we are going to explain at the moment, there are plenty of different systems, plenty of different requirements, and it's very, very hard and complex to be compliant with all of those. Maybe I can do a small remark also on terminology, because as you can see, we are talking about notification process, but on some sources you will maybe read about declaration or you will read about registration. These are all terms that can be used as synonyms. We at WorkFlex, we decided to stick the term notification because we think it's more consistent and coherent, given the fact that in the European legislation is the most commonly used one, but at the national level, there are always different terminologies. And I think this also shows a bit the confusion around this topic.
Yeah, very good. In Belgium, they're called Limosa, so they've got creative country-specific names for this everywhere. And maybe just going back into time, Martina, what was the whole reason that PWDs were invented anyway?
Yeah, so basically the idea is that, as you know, there are fundamental freedoms in the European Union, freedom of providing services, freedom of workers to take employment in another European country without need to have a work permit, freedom to sell or buy goods that are from other European countries. And of course, in this context, it might happen that a company that is established in one member state decides to provide a service in another member state through employees that are hired in the first state. So yeah, the European Union, the European institutions decided that this should be possible, but of course, provided that some conditions are observed. So the employees that are going to work in a different state than the one where they are hired should be granted with some rights. So for instance, we will look at it more in detail, but they should be granted with the observation of the working hours of the destination country. If I'm hired in Germany, but I'm going to work in Belgium, I should observe the working hours in Belgium that are different because in Germany is 40 hours per week, where in Belgium is usually 38. So without going into details, but the core idea would be that the posted workers should be granted with rights. And therefore, it's important to put the labor authorities in the condition to actually monitor that these rights are observed. And what is the way to do it? Through the enforcement, through the notification precisely.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for the explanation. I see some people have a little bit of issues with the stream. I hope for the majority it does work though. Yeah, so indeed, it's basically a system that provides some core protection for workers that are internationally assigned to work in other countries. And this is done through a European directive, which is an arrangement that is then made at a European level. And there's an obligation, correct me if I'm wrong, Martina, you know this better than I do, but there's an obligation for the national governments or legislators to then put this in a country-specific law. And that's also why there's sometimes a little bit of a different arrangement in place as to who is considered a posted worker. For instance, workationers, they're widely considered not to be posted because it's an individual reason that they're working from another country. Except for Belgium. In Belgium, they are very strong. They are considered posted workers. And then there's different rules for every country. So, for instance, if you have posted workers to Germany, really only in specific sectors, there's a notification requirement. But if you post people to the Scandinavian countries, these requirements are usually a little bit tougher and apply to almost everyone. So there's different arrangements on the law itself, who is posted and when should a notification be made. But then we come to the actual process, and Martina, you can already see it here on the screen. There are also national, let's say, processes defined for these notifications, right?
Exactly. So before we deep dive on the proposal, let's say something about the current system. We have now 31 different notification systems. Of course, the most attentive among you would say, okay, but how is it possible given the fact that in the European Union, we actually have 27 member states? Well, that's a valid question. This is because the notification process doesn't only exist in the European Union, but it exists also at the EFTA level, so the European Free Trade Association, that includes also Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. So these four states, without being members of the European Union, without being bound to the European Union legislation, decided to adopt and implement in their national system posted worker notification rules. So you have to comply with the notification rules also when you are posting employees to this four additional countries. Of course, the fact that we have 31 different notification systems means that we have so many differences spread around Europe. And we decided that we can compare three systems actually to compare the difficulty level. So we start with Germany. That is an example of a quite smooth notification process, because you can do notifications basically online with a very easy system where you log in with your email, username, and password. And it's available in several languages, so you do not have to do it necessarily in German. You can also do it in English and in French. And the data that you have to report are super general and high level, right? So they want to know where the employee is going to work, the date, the employee date of birth, and not much more. So we can say that Germany is a system where it's not hard at all to submit the notification. If we look to other systems, for instance, Greece, it's way more complex. So it's a medium level probably of difficulty. First of all, it's all in Greek language. Okay, today, thank you to translators, we can translate things. But yeah, that's of course the first issue. Then you don't have a portal where you can log in, but you have to submit a letter. You have to submit this declaration in Greek to the Greek Labor Authority, and it's not centralized, so you have to find out yourself who is competent at the territorial level. And once you found out, you have to send a letter. And actually, you will not get any confirmation. So it's very unlikely that the Greek authority, once they receive your letter, they will acknowledge the receipt. So you don't have a proof actually that you submitted this notification. We at Workflex, of course, we monitor the shipping and the tracking numbers. So we are sure that it was actually delivered, but it's us looking at the website. So the authority doesn't provide you with an answer. And then, last but not the least, another difficulty is that they ask plenty of sensitive data. They don't want only know about the date of birth of the employee, but they also want to know the family status and even the salary. So this overall makes the notification quite complex. But it's not even the worst system, because if we look at Norway, well, in Norway, it's even harder, I would say, because the first difficulty you encounter is with the activation of the account. So you cannot create an account like in Germany with a simple email, username, and password. You will have to create a trusted account, which means that the CEO of your company will have to have his or her identity certified by a public authority. And as you know, CEO are pretty busy people, so it's not that easy to get this first requirement fulfilled. But of course, even once you get it, then the activation process takes some time, because you have to complete it via mail. So you have to send the certification to the authority. You have to wait for them to activate your account. You also have to pay some administrative fees. So it costs you time and money. And even once you activate the account, the data that you have to submit can be quite demanding to be found. For instance, they want to know about the contract number, the service agreement number, that is not always available to employees or to employer in the country of employment. So as you can see, you can find many difficulties in the different systems around Europe at the moment.
Yeah, exactly, because these are only 3 examples. And for instance, if we look at Spain, there are notification processes that differ per region. Same goes for Switzerland. So long story short, 31 different notification systems. I guess that's a good reason to change it. That's what we're going to talk about today as well. But of course, for many employers, Martina, could also be a good reason to say, oh, that's a lot of hustle. It's a lot of data gathering. I just don't feel like it. But what is the problem, or what are the potential penalties if you fail to submit PWD notifications where they are required?
Well, actually here as well, we need to give a very differentiated answer, and a very legal answer. That is, it depends. So it depends again. We will have to look into the national systems. And there are different degrees of tolerance, of severe sanctions. It might be that in some countries, when they find, of course, the first violation, they just give you a warning. So they invite you to comply, but they don't sanction you at the very first stage, which is a common practice. But of course, it's not always the case. So there are countries that have pretty strict regulations, that have economic sanction. We can take as example Switzerland, where if you fail to submit a notification, or if you submit it but you don't submit it within the deadline, you can encounter a fine of up to 5,000 euros. And then, as I said, it's not only about the notification, even if today we're focusing on the notification, right? So there might be even other sanctions if you fail to comply with the working conditions, that can go really up to even over 50,000 euros for most severe violation. And it's not only about fines. You might also have a service ban, so you are not able to provide services in Switzerland for maybe 5 years. And you actually can also be published on a list that is available and shared by the labor authorities, which is, of course, very bad for your reputation as an employer and as a service provisioner. So yeah, economic sanctions, but also service provisions ban, which make it pretty risky to not be compliant.
Yeah, it can become rather expensive, huh? And maybe another example of a rather practical problem in quite a few countries, again, talking mainly about the Scandinavian countries, where there are posted worker notification requirements for quite a few trips. It's also common practice, especially in particular sectors, that your workers will not even be let onto the workplace, into the office or into the factory or work site, whatever it is, where they are supposed to work, if they can't show that they've done a PWD notification, and usually they should then also bring an A1 or a COC. So that's a rather practical one. Then the whole business trip was for nothing because they will not be able to do their work. Yeah, thanks, Martina. I think it very clearly shows the problem. Maybe to drill down on a couple of the current challenges before we dive into the proposal.
Yeah, I think we highlighted this already a bit. The main issue of having 31 different notification systems is that we are facing legal uncertainty. So you have to look at different systems. It means that you have to invest a lot of time, money, and resources to really check what is the compliance requirement, what you have to comply with in every specific destination countries. And monitor 31 legal systems means, of course, that you also need to monitor the changes of these national systems, right? Because they are not adopted only once, but they are also object of reforms at the national level. I think we can give a couple of examples. For instance, Lithuania had a system like in Greece, where you had to submit in the local language. You have to send everything via mail to the labor authorities. And then they changed it, right? So then they decided to adopt a website, and now you're able to submit even in English. So this is an example of an improvement of a process, but of course it's also an example of how you need to be monitoring and be sure that you know what is the current version. Another example is also Czech Republic, where there is a website, and at first they ask you about the data, and then they introduce an upload function. So you also have to upload some documents like the employment contract. Last but not least, I think it's quite interesting to quote Italy as well, that had an access system like in Germany, simply with username and password. And then they decided to introduce something similar to Norway. So there is a trusted account, a system that they check your identity in order to really be able to submit the notification. And this, of course, goes together with the fact that there are disproportionate and duplicated efforts when you submit a notification in different countries. Because if the same employee is going to travel to Austria and then to France, of course, you realize immediately that you are entering twice the same data of the same employee on two different platforms. And of course, it's not super efficient. So starting by this observation, the Commission thinks that it makes sense to avoid this duplication of efforts by employers and by companies. Because what is the result if the systems are so difficult? First of all, there is room for human error. So we're not perfect. We can make mistakes, and there can be indeed mistakes in the notification itself. But at the end, what happens is I think the most important thing is the lack of compliance, right? So the employers simply give up and they say, okay, I cannot really afford it, especially small and medium companies. They can say, okay, you know what, I'm simply not going to be compliant and take the risk. And as we already said, the sanctions might be quite dramatic. So, yeah, it's a big risk that they take, but at the end of the day, they might even just decide to not submit notifications with all that might involve as a consequence.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there you summarized very nicely the real problem, right? And it's also the reason why the EU Commission now presented this proposal. Bottom line, we're talking about compliance. They want to protect international travelers, but because of the variety in the different processes and the complexity of gathering the data, being able to submit a notification, in practice, there are quite a few companies that aren't submitting PWD notifications at all. It's a lack of compliance, but from an EU perspective, then we're talking, yeah, look, nothing's happening. We don't know, there's no protection. Basically, the whole objective is not met. And maybe also a little bit of unfairness, so to say, where companies that do want to comply put in a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort in putting these notifications in. And well, that's unfair on itself, but also what you see quite heavily today is that, of course, if a notification has been submitted, then there will be some audits every now and then. And it's a little bit unfair if you are the one that really tries to comply, does all these notifications, and then you're the one being audited. And all those other companies that aren't doing anything, they hardly get audited. Of course, if something goes wrong, it can be very expensive for them. But basically, yeah, the objective of the PWD notification system is simply not met through the system that we currently have. So there's quite a bit of text on this slide, but I think, Martina, we've talked about all of it, and I think it would be good to focus on the proposal itself. Can you explain what the key features of this e-declaration proposal are?
Exactly. So, as you said, the European Commission starts from the observation that it's a paradox that companies have to comply with some requirements, and then they are not put in the conditions to comply because the process it's too complex and elaborated. So the aim of the Commission is to simplify the current notification system, which should be a single e-declaration. So the system will be unique. We will stop having to deal with different systems. There will be only one system, which will have the following features. So it will be available in all the official languages, which of course it's a very big advantage. So if you want to submit a notification to Greece, you will be able to do it in German, in Italian, Spanish, Dutch, whatever is your mother tongue, wherever you feel more comfortable. So a multilingual system, a system that works online, so we can finally say goodbye, adios to the mail, to the shipping costs, to the tracking, to the letters. We are in a new century, so we make sure that everything is going to be handled online and standardized. So the access should be simple and guaranteed and available to everyone. You do not have to go through trusted account, national specific requirements. And the big advantage will also be that you avoid duplication of the same effort. So the system, since it is unique, it will store the data. So if you have an employee that already traveled to a country and then you have to notify the labor authorities of another country, you don't have to enter again the data of this same employee because they will be already stored somewhere on the platform. So you save time. And last but not least, the system should be, of course, free. So we mentioned that there might be sometimes administrative cost, not only related to mail, but some countries, they want you to pay an administrative fees. This is something that will also not be enforced anymore. So the system will be free. And of course, the system will have to be safe, digitalized, and simplified for all the stakeholders involved.
Yeah, great summary. So multilingual, online, safe and free sounds like a dream. I think very good. Of course, we've already talked about the challenges, like the problems with the current system. They are, of course, the aim is to solve these. But there's going to be some implications, of course, and you've got 3 of them listed here, Martina.
Yeah, exactly. So there are different implications, different consequences for everyone. First of all, we look, of course, at the service providers, so at the companies from the employer side. So the European Commission estimates that there will be a reduction in terms of time to submit the notification of 73%. So actually the time invested will decrease, which is good. And then a 25% reduction in the administrative burden. Here, I think it's important to precise what they are referring to when they talk about administrative burden. So this is everything that surrounds the notification submission itself. So it's not about entering the system and putting the data into the system, but it's about data gathering, getting familiar with the process, understanding, monitoring it. And of course, one might say, hey, but only 25% of reduction is not that significant number. Of course, because here we're only talking about notification. There will be other administrative requirements you will still need to be compliant with when it comes to posted worker. So of course, we cannot look at this proposal, if it will be adopted, like really a dream, right? We have to be realistic. Here we are only talking about the notification itself, but there will still be other requirements for the employers to comply with when they are posting employees to another country. So I want to be clear on that the administrative effort will be reduced, but will not be completely cancelled. Then we can look at the employees. So consequence for the employees, first of all, as we already said, the aim is to guarantee a better protection of the posted workers' right. And also, quite interesting, it's to make sure that they are somehow involved in the process. So at the moment, they do not really play any role. I think there is a nice exception, that is the Netherlands. So on the Dutch portal, you are going to be asked at the end, before you click on submit, do you want to notify the posted employees that you actually submitted a notification for him or for her? This is optional. You do not have to do it, but the employer can decide if they want to inform the employees or not. This is an exception. So in the other countries, the employees don't have to be provided with the notification itself. So it's a choice of the employers if they want to do it or not. Of course, we do not know how the system will look like. So maybe in the declaration, then the confirmation at the end, there will also be a message for the employees saying, okay, please keep in mind that you have some rights. Maybe the rights will be listed. Who knows how it will look in practice? But here we are only speculating. The thing is that they are going to be informed about the fact that they were notified, that the labor authorities were notified. And last but not the least, of course, there will be consequences for the labor authorities, because the labor authorities will be able to monitor compliance more effectively and more easily, of course. And this means in practice that what we can expect is actually an increase of the audit and the labor inspections, because the authorities will be able to communicate with each other easily. And as you know, sometimes even in the current system, authorities need to ask information to authorities of another country. So if they communicate more easily, they can also take into account the violations that occurred in another country. So yeah, this is a very, very important consequence for everyone.
Yeah, very good point. So Martina and myself, we have read all the documentation, so you don't have to. And at least what I personally got from it very strongly is, of course, it's about employee protection and about making the process simpler. What is a very clear objective as well is to increase the audit capabilities. So it might be a little bit of a blessing in disguise, to be honest, because like Martina said, you will still have to do notification. You will still need some type of information from the employee, from the destination, let's say, project, destination location at least. Of course, it might be less. At least it's centralized or uniform now what information you're going to need, but you still need it. but the expectation or the objective is that the number of audits in this area will very strongly increase. And I think it also fits into the, let's say, global trend that you see anyway, a little bit more protectionism left and right. Good examples of this are also the UK travel authorization that was introduced recently, the European travel authorization, like the European ESTA, that is going to be introduced very quickly, or is going to go live very quickly. So yeah, it sounds like a great initiative, and I think it is, but don't be fooled. It will actually also lead to increased audits. So it may be easier to comply, but you will have to comply, which may not necessarily be the reality today. So I'm seeing quite a few questions coming in. Really happy with this. Christina, will definitely come to your question in a second. Sarah asked Martina, will there be an alignment on the definition of posted workers? And when you then, of course, have to submit a notification for those?
So thank you both Christina and Sarah for their questions. Let's start with Sarah. Yes, actually, it's a very, very good one. And it shows, of course, knowledge about the topic. Unfortunately, as we said, this reform only aims to have an impact on the notification system itself. So on the modalities, how you submit a notification, while the national legislation will not be affected when it comes to define what is an activity that needs to be notified or not. So all these nuances among systems that we are facing, like some countries are stricter when it comes to meetings, some countries differentiate from internal and external meetings, or some countries like Spain have a specific timely deadline, 8 days. Austria has salary requirements. All these national specific substantial rules will not be affected, will still be into force. So unfortunately, we'll still have to look and monitor national legislation on posted workers. Yes, I hope this answer your questions and doesn't give you too much of a negative perspective, but unfortunately, it will not be affected.
And the reason for this is pretty simple, right? The EU Commission can, of course, only make a proposal at a European level. And what Austria decided to do with it back in the day, or what Switzerland and Spain decided to do with it back in the day, what Belgium decided to do with it back in the day when they said, look, I think everybody's a posted worker. For us, even workationers, well, they didn't really consider workationers, of course, back then. But that's national legislation. So, of course, we cannot exclude the possibility, very lawyer sentence, that those national legislators will also pick up this initiative and say, we might also align our national legislation to a certain extent. But that's definitely not a given, and it's not part of this proposal, at least. A similar question was raised by Tika. I think I probably pronounced it wrongly, but beautiful name. And thank you for your question. The question is, with the simplified and unified notification process, does this still mean that local country-specific requirements and parameters would continue, or would also these, let's say, principles and parameters become consistent? And correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, but the short answer to this is no, it doesn't mean that they are going to remain consistent. Well, they're going to remain inconsistent. Just an example, in Norway, where you have to do this pretty difficult registration today, your individual travelers will also have to go to a tax office to identify themselves and obtain a so-called D number. It's unlikely that the Norwegian authorities or legislators are going to pick up this proposal and say, we're going to change this. So we expect that the notification, the pure notification process, will be much simpler, much less data required, as you can see right now. But you can see on the right-hand side on this slide, there's going to be a lot left really unchanged.
Yeah, exactly. And if I might add on that, not only the pre-requirement, so whether the notification is required or not, but also what you have to be compliant with after you submitted the notification, right? So the document storage, the document retention, be compliant with the local working condition, like the equal pay. This will all stay unaffected, even if this e-declaration proposal will entry into force. And another interesting point is whether you have to notify only if your employer is from the European countries or not. This is also a very big difference, right? So we have countries like Spain, where you notify only if the employer is based in another EU country. But you have also a country like Romania, where they would like to be provided with notification, even if your employer is based outside of the EU. So these are all big examples of things you will still need to be aware of.
Yeah, thanks, Martina. Before you dive into, let's say, the main risks that we still see today, I think a very good question from Michelle is, okay, amazing. Apparently, individual or country-specific rules will remain to apply. Will the system include information around this or not?
That's a very good question. And unfortunately, the answer is we do not know yet. So it is not clarified in the proposal from the Commission whether it will be the case or not.
What is your confidence level that it will be?
Quite frankly, I'm a bit skeptical that the system will be in the short term implemented for all countries. So, yeah, even if this was adopted by everyone, it will mean that there are many specific aspects to take into account and implement in the system. And I guess it's not very likely that it will be the case. So I'm a bit skeptical.
Yeah, I know, Martina, a little bit longer than today. This was a low confidence level to translate. Yeah, but also, look, Michelle, I definitely do not expect that system to include information. If you try to find the information today on the country governmental websites even, it's hardly possible, to be frank. Let's not assume that all of a sudden these legislators are going to provide on an EU level information what other requirements need to be met. So my confidence level is exactly 0, to be honest. Maybe quickly before we dive into this one, there was already a question about it, and I think it's important to get the basics right. So how and when, Martina, is this proposal going to be implemented, if at all?
Yeah. Okay. So in the proposal itself, the Commission only said that if at all adopted, it should enter into force after 3 months. So we need to ask ourselves how long the adoption it's going to take. And it's not very easy to predict. So the average duration, according to statistics, after the proposal, it's 30 months. So it's not that short. We have in the posted worker field some good examples. So the very first directive on posted workers took 4 years to be adopted, way more than a few months, while the following directives, so the enforcement directive on 2014, introducing the notification processes, and the directive of 2018, introducing the equal pay principle, were adopted in about 2 years. So this took a bit less. But after the adoption, you have to wait some more time, because after the adoption, then there is the full implementation timing. And this might also be different depending on the practical circumstances. But usually after the adoption, it takes 2-3 years to really implement the system. So it means they will have to design the portal and adopt all the necessary technicalities and make it compatible with every national system. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take at least some years, if at all adopted, because I want to highlight here that in the proposal, the Commission clearly say that this is a voluntary basis, right? So we might have some states that decided to adopt the e-declaration unique system, and some other states that say, no, I prefer to stick to my own national system. With as a result, another paradox, we might have 10 member states with one system and the other 17 with their national system. I tend to think that probably the countries that have only the mail system, that didn't implement a national website and a national portal, might be more willing to adopt the system because it will make things easier. But it's a national choice. It's about national parliaments. We cannot be sure really who will decide to adopt or not.
Yeah, so worst case, we end up not with one system, but with maybe 28 plus one, or maybe even 31 plus one. And of course, a proposal like this is not made just because someone was bored. There was a lot of feedback, and also probably, and you can read it in the documentation, there seems to be quite some support for this proposal, not only from, let's say, legislators and other authorities, but also from, of course, employers pushing for simplification here. But it's really to be, let's say, to be seen how fast it's going to be adopted, if it's going to be adopted, and then which countries are going to adopt it. And I think I've seen a couple of questions. Thanks, Oscar, Anita, and Heimo. We'll go through them. I think a very important one for the adoption or the success level of this proposal is indeed how are different country governments or authorities, how are they going to decide on at least some quite fundamental principles? And Anita, you're asking this requirement for non-EU countries posting to the EU. Martina, do you expect this rule to be unified or?
Actually, no, because it's not really mentioned at all in these 37 pages of proposal that these substantial requirements should be affected at all. So the proposal, it's really only about the notification. It's only about creating this unique portal without affecting the national specific posted workers implementation rules. So I must say that if this will ever happen, it will require another separate proposal, because based on the current proposal, based on the current legal basis, this is not really part of the reform.
Well, I guess this doesn't necessarily have to be a showstopper for the process to come into play. Heimo asks another very good question. So for some processes today, you need to upload quite some supporting documents like employment contracts and things like this. For some countries, it's not required at all, and you should formally keep this information or documentation with you when the employee is traveling. Martina, was there anything said about a unification of this process, or also unclear today?
Unclear whether there will be an upload function, but personally, I think that having in mind this aim of simplification and make a system that is safe and easily accessible for everyone, I tend to think that if they want to reduce the administrative burden, the effort, etc., it will be coherent to not introduce an update function at this stage. So I wouldn't expect it. But of course, we need to keep in mind that in the current proposal, there is nothing, but we cannot be sure that during the negotiations for the adoption, maybe something will be still changed, right? So the proposal can also change during the legislative process. So let's see. But at the current status, it doesn't seem very likely that there will be an upload function of the documents.
I agree. It would also very strongly hurt the objective, right, of making the process simpler and sweeter. If you then still have to go and upload all types of documents, it's definitely going to be a more administrative and lengthy process. So yeah, I share your expectation there, Martina. Maybe just quickly on Oscar's question. That question is, if we have an employee from India traveling to Germany for a month, do we need to do a posted worker notification? And I think this question, or the answer to it, really shows nicely how, let's say, how this process works, because I know what you're going to say, Martina. The lawyer answer, it depends, right?
It depends on several other elements that, of course, are not mentioned in the question, like what is the sector, because in Germany, it depends really on the sector where the employee is going to work, whether the notification is required or not. But let's say that it's taking place in a sector where the German law requires you to submit a notification. The time, really the duration of the posting doesn't play a significant role. So even if it is very short, according to German law, if the sector is concerned, then you have to submit a notification. And concerning the home country, so Germany is one of the countries where you should notify the labor authorities, even if the employer is not based in the European Union. So when you log in to this smooth portal that we described at the beginning, you have a drop down from which you can select the country of employment. And you have all the European countries listed, and then you have Sonstige, so you have others, and this will have to be selected if you're not based in the EU. So in principle, an Indian employer has to be comply with the posted worker notifications obligations in Germany, yes.
Thank you very much. So thanks everybody for so many questions. If you've got any remaining questions, there's only a few minutes left to type them in either the chat or the question sector. Maybe to go to the so what. Think it's pretty clear now. Yes, the current system is definitely not very nice. It's rather complex and very differentiated amongst countries, maybe even regions. The objective of the proposal is rather clear, simplify it, but the consequence might not be so nice, that there's going to be way more audits and an actual true practical obligation to be compliant. So we have to prepare for this, and with an exclamation mark, you can see it here. So what? Well, you better be ready for more inspections to come, assuming the proposal is going to be adopted in general, but also then by quite some countries. So what are you going to have to do over the next year? Because, of course, legislators do not really move fast, is make sure you monitor updates from the EU Commission. You can also just simply follow Workflex on LinkedIn. There we will post the updates if there are any as soon as possible, of course. Strengthen documentation and reporting, because like I said earlier, and like Martina also explained, there will be requirements to, well, provide information. And what we see today is that a lot of employers have chosen to go with, I'm just not going to do it. I don't do PWD notifications. I don't gather the information. I have no documentation. Look, in the new system, with the higher chance of audits and the higher frequency of audits, you better be prepared. You're going to have to do notifications. They're simpler. Congratulations. The bad news, you will have to do it, and it's still an effort at the end of the day. I'm quite confident, by the way, that bottom line time spent on PWD compliance in the new system is going to be higher, because maybe the time spent on compliance per notification is a lot lower. I do think the number of notifications is going to explode, to be honest. And of course, if you have 100 notifications times 1 minute, it's more time spent than if you only do 10 on which you spent 3 minutes. Did I get that math right? Yes, I did. Also prepare financially for it, because you're probably not going to want to do these PWD notifications all yourself. You want to maybe engage a service provider for this, maybe develop some in-house technology to also gather the information from the travelers more easily. So it's a good idea to start allocating already a little bit of budget to this. And last, of course, but yeah, it's easy for me to say as an employee of a technology company, invest in technology. Like I said, the number of PWD notifications is going to explode. And that's when technology comes into play, especially if you consider that a process going to be unified, then you're talking a volume and a process which is, in German, you would say geeignet, it's made for automation. So please make sure to use that benefit or grasp that advantage that you're going to have in the new world. But of course, make sure that you're prepared for this. So I have not seen any new questions coming in. You've only got 1 minute left. I'll just scroll back up to this one. Please remember, I hope you liked this webinar. If there were any key learnings or just want to share some feedback with us, please do so on LinkedIn, Tech Workflex, and you'll get a surprise Christmas gift from us. Other than this, I think we're great in time. Martina, any closing remarks from your end?
Actually, I just would like to emphasize quite shortly once more that everyone must be aware that the fact that there is this proposal doesn't mean that there will be the e-declaration. So as we said in our subtitle, we have to redefine myths and expectations. Do not be sure and do not assume that it will be implemented. We have so many examples in the history of the European Union of cases where the Commission proposed something and then the national governments decided to not go with it. And last but not least, even if this will be implemented, it will take quite some time. It will be on a voluntary basis, like the French would say à la carte. So it will be a menu who decides to adhere or not. But it doesn't mean that the posted worker obligations will be revoked in general. So we'll still need to be compliant. And that's the aim of the Commission, to make sure that compliance is monitored and effective.
Exactly. So great ideas, but very unclear what we're actually going to see from this. Well, we will keep you posted, literally and figuratively speaking, on any progress. Martina, thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge and experience here. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for sharing your questions. It was really cool to have this interactive session. I think it's going to be our last webinar for this calendar year, because now holiday season is starting. Wishing you happy holidays, already a happy and healthy 2025, and looking forward to seeing you then at another webinar. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thank you. Bye-bye.